Most parents think they're raising a child, but the truth is, they're parenting their past. Before your child ever looks at you, you're already looking at them through the lens of your own childhood. Attachment isn't a concept, it's a reflex, a memory written in the body. It begins before language, before logic, before you even know what love is, and yet it teaches you everything about how to receive it or fear it. You don't learn about connection from books. You learn it in a room you don't remember, in the rhythm of your mother's footsteps, in the sound of your father's sigh, in how long it took someone to come when you cried. That moment, that answer, yes, no delay, silence, became your first truth. And your body never forgot. It became the mirror, the one you've been holding ever since. If you were met with warmth, that mirror said, "You are seen. You matter." If you were ignored, it said, "Hide that part. You're too much." If you were only noticed when you smiled, it said, "Perform, shrink, adapt." And now you stand in front of your own child, holding the same mirror. But what reflection do they see? Do they see someone present or preoccupied? Do they see love that stays or love they have to earn? Do they see their emotions welcomed or edited? This is the foundation of attachment. And here's the part no one wants to say out loud. Most of us were not securely attached. Most of us are improvising with broken tools. The data is startling. Nearly 40% of children in the Western world grow up with insecure attachment styles. Not because their parents didn't love them, but because love wasn't consistent, presence wasn't safe, emotion wasn't held, so we adapted. We became anxious, avoidant, hyper-independent, hyper-attuned. We made ourselves small enough to fit into someone else's capacity. And now, years later, we call it our personality, but it isn't a personality, it's a response. And your child, they're not just watching you, they're feeling you, they're memorizing your tone when they cry, they're internalizing the pause before you respond. They're asking the same question your nervous system still carries. Will someone come when I cry? Will someone stay when I'm too much? And what you do next becomes their mirror. This isn't about blame, this is about awareness. Because the mirror doesn't have to stay broken. The answer doesn't have to echo. The thread, yes, the invisible thread between you and your child can be rewoven, not through perfection, through presence, not through theory, through repair. You can become the mirror you never had, the one that reflects back, "You're safe, you're allowed, you don't have to earn me." This is where the journey begins. And if you're willing to walk it with honesty, with courage, with grace, you may not just raise a securely attached child. You may meet the child you once were. And finally, tell them what they've been waiting their whole life to hear. "I see you, I believe you, I'm not leaving, and neither is love." Clingy, that's what they call the child who won't let go, who cries too long, who asks for one more hug, one more story, one more "I love you." But that child, they aren't trying to manipulate, they're trying to survive. Anxious attachment doesn't begin in neediness, it begins in inconsistency. When a child never knows if comfort will come or if today is the day love turns away, they start scanning, watching, managing every detail of your mood like their safety depends on it, because it does. To the anxious child, love is not a promise, it's a puzzle. And they're solving it with everything they have. They track your tone, your timing, the way your hand lingers or doesn't. They sense your distraction before you speak. They say "I love you" 10 times, not because they're unsure of their love, but because they're unsure of yours. This isn't emotional immaturity, it's relational hyperintelligence. And here's the part that will break your heart. The child who clings the hardest is usually the one who fears they're easiest to leave. They hold you tight because they believe deep down that they might be the reason love disappears. That's not drama, that's a nervous system screaming quietly for reassurance. And many of us know exactly what that feels like. We were the emotional caretakers in our families, the peacekeepers, the good kids. We learned that love was conditional, that it could be taken away by tone, by silence, by the wrong expression at the wrong time, and so we adapted. We became easy. we became intuitive, we became exhausted. And now, as adults, we carry the ache into every relationship, into parenting, into our own moments of distance, because nothing activates an anxious inner child like your own child pulling away. You might find yourself over-explaining, over-apologizing, hovering when you mean to hold space, not because you're weak, but because you were never shown what secure connection really feels like. That's not your fault, but it is your responsibility now. Because the anxious child doesn't need to be told to stop clinging. They need someone to stay, to breathe, to say, you're safe, to say, I'm not going anywhere, to say, you don't have to work for this love, it's already yours. And yes, this takes time. As Krishna told Arjuna in the Mahabharata, the memory of absence takes longer to heal than the presence of love. That's what anxious attachment is, a body that remembers being forgotten and only stops bracing when safety becomes a pattern, not a promise. You build that pattern through repetition, through calm after their storm, through showing up when they expect you not to, through repair when you miss it, because you will miss it. And that's okay. What matters most isn't that you never rupture. It's that you return over and over until their nervous system stops flinching, and then the magic happens. The goodbye doesn't trigger panic. The independence doesn't feel like abandonment. The hug doesn't come from need, it comes from choice. And when your child runs into your arms, not because they're scared, but because they feel safe, you'll know the ache has begun to soften. And you've answered the question that once went unanswered in your own body. You've broken the cycle and built a bridge. If you were that anxious child, if you learned to earn love through constant giving, drop a line in the comments. Even if it's just, I see me. Because that's how healing spreads. When we stop hiding our ache and name it with compassion. When we stop clinging because finally we know someone is staying. Not every child cries when you walk away. Some go still. Some look you in the eyes and say, I'm fine, with a smile so carefully constructed you'd never think to look beneath it. But underneath there's a wall. Thick, quiet, polished like stone. Avoidant attachment doesn't shout. It hides in the child who never complains, who plays alone, who doesn't reach for you when they fall. Not because they're brave. Because they've learned that asking brings nothing, and when love doesn't come, the body finds a way to survive without it. So the child builds something, a fortress, a self that doesn't need, doesn't ask, doesn't ache, a self that becomes easy to raise, low maintenance, so independent. But the fortress is not peace, it's grief with armor, and the world applauds it. We call these kids mature, we call them strong, we don't notice the silence, we don't ask what's behind the closed door, and often neither does the child. Because eventually even they forget there was ever a door at all. Avoidant attachment isn't coldness, it's protection. A defense against the pain of disappointment. A nervous system that flinches before the need even arrives, that whispers, don't bother, no one's coming. And here's what most people miss. The avoidant child is not without emotion, they're drowning in it privately. Their independence is a shell and not a signal of security. Inside, they're still hoping you'll notice, still wondering what it would feel like to fall apart in someone's arms. But hope is dangerous when it's been unmet. So they trade vulnerability for control, emotion for efficiency, longing for logic, and then they grow up. They become adults who feel safest alone, and partners who shut down when intimacy gets too close, parents who love deeply but from a distance. Parents who keep the schedule but not the softness, who say, I'm here, but can't make eye contact when their child cries, not because they don't care, because caring touches a place in them that was never touched gently, and in that place everything shakes. There's a line by Carl Jung that whispers under every avoidant adaptation, nothing has a stronger influence psychologically on children than the unlived life of the parent. And the unlived life of the avoidant parent is the emotional child who stopped hoping, who still doesn't trust that softness won't collapse into absence, and now they're holding a child who reaches for them. And It terrifies them, because their child's needs reopen at a door they closed a long time ago. But here's the hope. That door can be opened again, not with force, with invitation, with quiet presence, with moments that say, I'm here if you want me, with hands that don't rush, with words that don't demand, because avoidant attachment was built on pressure and unpredictability. The antidote is consistency without demand. A child with this pattern needs space, but they also need to know the bridge is still there. They need a presence that doesn't disappear just because they don't ask for it. And when that presence stays, when love doesn't punish silence or demand performance, the fortress begins to soften, not all at once, not dramatically, but in small ways. In a child who lingers longer at bedtime, in a teen who finally says, I don't want to talk about it, but doesn't leave the room, in an adult who lets their partner hold their hand without pulling away. There's a Japanese art called kintsugi, the mending of broken pottery with gold. It doesn't hide the cracks, it celebrates them. Avoidant attachment is a crack. But when met with gentleness, that crack becomes a path, not back to dependence, but forward to connection. And that child who never cried, one day they will. And the tears won't be a breakdown, they'll be a breakthrough. If you were the avoidant child, if silence became your safest place, say something in the comments, even just still here, because the first step out of the fortress isn't a leap, it's a whisper. Every parent walks into the room carrying more than groceries, more than snacks, more than the to-do list of the day. They carry echoes, the sound of their own childhood, still reverberating through the walls of their nervous system. And unless they've paused to hear it, they pass it on. Not through intention, through instinct. Parenting doesn't start with our child, it starts with our story, and most of us were never taught how to read it. We remember our childhood in fragments, moments, moods, flashes, but our bodies remember the whole thing, the tone that silenced us, the absence that shaped us, the rage that taught us fear, the praise that made us perform. And now, years later, our child does something small, a whine, a protest, a need, and something in us overreacts. We snap, we freeze, we shut down, not because they've done something wrong, but because they've touched a bruise we forgot we had. The unprocessed wound gets triggered and the echo grows louder. You were told you were too sensitive, so now your child's tears feel like weakness. You were ignored, so now your child's neediness feels manipulative. You were shamed for mistakes, so now you panic every time your child reflects imperfection back to you. And the story repeats. The echo becomes a script. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. In parenting, that fate has a name. It's the attachment style we pass on, unless we choose not to, unless we pause the echo, unless we do the most radical thing a parent can do. Look back, not to blame, but to understand, to trace the tension in your voice back to the moment yours was silenced. To trace the need to control back to the moment you felt out of control. To recognize that the child in front of you is not repeating your past. They're inviting you to rewrite it. There's a story rarely told of an elder healer from West Africa who would sit with new mothers and ask them not, how is your child, but how is the child inside of you? Because she knew that unspoken pain becomes the language of parenting, that the mother who was never soothed might flinch at her own baby's cry, that the father who was never protected might struggle to protect without aggression, that the grandparent who raised themselves might find softness unbearable. But she also knew something else, that healing begins when we acknowledge who we were, before we became who we had to be. This is earned security, not a gift, a choice. The choice to say, I was not raised with what I needed, but I will not use that as an excuse to withhold it from my child. The choice to grieve your unmet needs without dumping them on the next generation. The choice to sit in your discomfort long enough to not make your child responsible for it. There's a mother named Elena who once told her therapist, when my daughter cries, I feel like I can't breathe. She had been raised in a home where crying was punished, where emotion meant chaos. where silence was the only safe space. She loved her child fiercely, but when the tears came, her own inner child panicked, so she avoided, braced, froze. Until one night her daughter sobbed in the dark, and Eleanor sat there, heart racing, body trembling, and did something new. She stayed. She didn't fix. She didn't flee. She stayed. And in that staying, something shifted. Her daughter calmed. And for the first time in years, Eleanor cried too. Not because she was overwhelmed, because she was finally safe enough to feel. That's how the echo quiets, not in grand apologies, in small acts of presence, in breath held when you want to shout, in silence held when you want to run, in returning after you rupture, and saying not just to your child, but to the one inside you, I'm here now, and I'm not repeating what was done to me. I'm becoming the parent I needed. If you're on that journey, if you're breaking a pattern without a map, drop "it ends with me" in the comments, because the echo fades faster when it's met with community, and your voice might be the one that helps someone else pause and begin again. Some children fall apart when you leave, others fall apart when you come too close. But there are those quiet, tender, rooted, who fall and rise in rhythm with your presence, who explore because they trust you'll be there when they return. This is secure attachment, not perfection, not performance, just presence. It doesn't always look poetic. Sometimes it looks like a meltdown at the grocery store, followed by a parent kneeling calmly in the middle of aisle 5. Sometimes it sounds like I hear you. I'm not mad, I'm still here. Secure attachment isn't built in grand gestures, it's built in repetition. You come back after conflict, you show up after silence. You listen when they cry and don't try to fix it. You stay when they're angry, when they're overwhelmed, when they push you, because they want to see what stays when everything else is tested, and what stays is you. Psychologist Dan Siegel calls it the safe haven and secure base, the paradox that love is both anchor and permission. It holds you close and lets you go. That's what children need. Not constant praise, not constant control, just the quiet confidence that they don't have to earn your affection or perform their pain or become smaller to keep your love. They need to know that you don't leave when they express what's real, that your love is bigger than the moment, that your presence can hold both joy and chaos, laughter and rupture, closeness and conflict. Because here's what secure children know deep in their bones. I can be mad and still loved. I can fail and still belong. I can grow and not lose you. When that's true, the world feels different. It feels navigable, not because it's safe, but because they carry safety inside them. In ancient Greece, they told the myth of Demeter and Persephone. When Persephone was taken to the underworld, Demeter's grief was so immense she stopped the seasons. The world froze, life paused. But when mother and daughter were reunited, spring returned. The thaw came, the earth breathed again. That's what secure attachment does. It doesn't prevent winters, it ensures returns. It promises that no matter how dark it gets, love can outlast the season. And when your child learns that, they stop bracing. They stop bargaining. They stop performing safety to avoid being left. They breathe. They explore. They grow. And they come back, not because they're scared, but because they know you'll still be there. The thread that was once frayed becomes strong. The mirror that once distorted becomes clear. And the parent who once panicked now waits calmly, confidently, knowing that trust is built in these small, repeated acts of return. And the child, they run. They fall. They glance back and they smile because they know the arms are still there. And when they come back, they're not seeking rescue. They're seeking reflection. They're saying, did you see that? I did it. And I knew I could because you were watching. That's the difference. Not dependence, not detachment, but relationship. A nervous system built not on fear, but on rhythm. If you're working to build that kind of safety for your child or for yourself, drop "spring returns" in the comments, because it does. No matter how long the winter lasted, no matter what you were taught, love can learn a new pattern, and safety, once modeled, never disappears. It becomes legacy. It happens in a moment you weren't expecting. Your child says something ordinary, they brush their teeth, they tie their shoes, they storm off slamming a door, and something catches in your throat. Not because of what they did, but because for a split second you saw yourself. The child you were, the one who learned to make themselves small in tense rooms, the one who cried quietly because loud sadness wasn't safe. The one who stopped asking questions because the answers hurt more than the silence. And for a moment, you're not just their parent, you're your own. Standing at the intersection of what was and what can still be. This is the final act of attachment, not the moment you learn to soothe them, but the moment you learn to soothe the child inside you. Because the past doesn't disappear, it integrates, and it integrates in your choices. Every time you take a breath instead of yelling, every time you repair instead of retreating, every time you pause and ask, what's this really about? You aren't just parenting your child, you're parenting the part of you that never got to feel safe, and it matters. Because that part doesn't disappear with age. It gets passed down unless you choose to stop the pattern. There's an old proverb from Sierra Leone, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. But if you want to go forward first, go back. That's what reparenting is. It's going back, not to relive, but to rewrite. To offer the child you once were the presence you never received, and to let that presence ripple forward into every word you say now, into how you handle your child's disappointment, into how you hold their tears without shrinking, into how you say, I was wrong without shame. Attachment is not static. It evolves, and secure attachment, it can be earned. It's earned every time you stay a little longer than you were taught to, every time you comfort instead of criticize, every time you choose to respond from the future you're building. Not the past you inherited. This is the mirror, not the one that shows you the child in front of you, the one that reflects the child within you. And when you finally meet their eyes, you can say, I'm sorry I left you alone with that pain. I'm sorry no one came when you cried, but I'm here now, and I'm not leaving, because secure attachment doesn't just raise a healthy child, it raises a healed adult. And if you're doing that work, if you're choosing reflection over reaction, presence over programming, love over legacy, then you are not just a parent. You are a cycle breaker, a memory rewriter, a future changer. Drop I'm the mirror in the comments if this is your journey. Let the algorithm carry your courage to someone else who needs it. Because maybe today your words become their reflection. And together we write a new ending. One where love didn't leave, one where presence didn't vanish, one where the child, the parent, and the past all find each other again and stay.